What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and welcome to the Cash or Pass review for Skald Against the Black Priory, a new retro style of crafting CRPG made by High North Studios and published by Raw Fury. In this video, I will discuss what the game is, what's good about it, and what's bad about it while being spoiler-free. This perspective will be from someone who has 100%ed the game on hard mode. Skald is a dungeon-crawling RPG in a Lovecraft setting. It's creepy, vicious, and the creatures of the dark are unfathomable terrors. Many of the seemingly mundane situations can take some wild turns which are executed well because of the writing in the game being top-notch. From the dialogue, storylines, and well-timed art during scenes, this game earns every emotion it evokes from the player. The game maintains this quality throughout on the back of its fantastic pacing. Each chapter cohesively leads into the next, building on what came before. The entire story was great, but my favorite part was actually the ending, which of course I'm not going to spoil. Skald gets a lot of things right. We already discussed the story, so let's talk about the gameplay. Fans of dungeon crawling TTRPGs and CRPGs will feel right at home with character creation. You have primary attributes which govern your skills and stats. Each class designates its primary attribute to help guide you in builds, but you still have your own freedom as well. There are 4 archetypes of classes: Warrior, Rogue, Mage, the Holy Trinity, and Cleric is added to the mix. These base classes have multiple specializations with the exception of Rogue, which has nothing. The subclasses have different roles and focuses while overlapping within the same archetype. For example, all warriors get a skill called Second Wind. For those who want a custom party, the game has you covered. Mercenaries are placed in settlements every so often so that you can build a full party, and the character creation is like when you build your protagonist. The difficulty has lots of customization options. If combat is something that takes a backseat for you, then you can tailor the game to feel more narrative driven. The base for hard mode isn't even as hard as the game can go, which means you can inflict even more hell upon yourself if you are so willing. For the audio and visuals, the graphics, music, sound design, and UI are all fantastic. Everything sounds nice and everything works well together. No game is without its faults. Despite all the praising that I just stated, there are few things that detract from this seeming perfection. Most of my criticisms will be focused around mechanics, since I love that subject in games, so this may not even apply to some players. Overall, combat balance was subpar. The player is able to gain multi-attack as early as level 6 for their warriors by saving their skill points from level 5, while very few enemies get multi-attack at all, and the ones that do are in the late game. Stuns were completely imbalanced as well, especially when combined with magic. Unless there's a patch since I've recorded this or I was mistaken, magic did not have to go through accuracy or resist checks on their initial application. Further turns checked resistances to nullify ongoing effects, but the first hits would always stick. This means that any spell that could stun would always get it off with no counterplay. Even bosses were susceptible to stuns. There's no further defense against this effect, such as being immune the next turn, so enemies can be stun locked for an entire fight. If this has not been patched out already, I hope it does get patched eventually, because it really takes away from the difficult encounters when you can just stun lock the hard enemies. Of course, you can also just not use stuns, which is what I ended up doing. This only applies to the magical based stuns because I feel that the weapon skill ones, since they have cooldowns and you have to actually hit the melee attack through their dodge, are much more fair by comparison. Outside of stun magic, mages and clerics felt pretty bad. The mana costs were relatively high, so you weren't allowed to spam spells, even though there's a system in place that was actually very smart called Cascade, which lets you chain spells, but with these limitations, it was never worth it. The spells you got access to weren't even that fun to use either. Debuffs, buffs, and battlefield control spells were lacking and limited, which led to martial character dominance. Other than that, the crafting system was lacking, enemy variety was low, and despite having a lot of great music, there weren't many songs in total. Now, cash or pass for Skald Against the Black Priory. With 100% certainty, it's cash. If the game looks appealing and you're on the fence, take the jump. It is a well-crafted and fun adventure. It isn't difficult to grasp the basics. and you'll only notice a lot of the negatives I mentioned if you're focusing on mechanics like I do. The dev even mentioned the possibility of a sequel if this game does well enough, and it seems like it is so far. If you want to support the channel, there are links such as Patreon in the box below to do so. Make sure to vote for the next review, which is between Wandering Sword, Warhammer 40k Mechanicus, and Manor Lords, which is an early access. Suggestions and critiques on the video format are also welcome. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.